Okay, sweet. We're live. Hi there. My name is Kent, and I am here with Tyler, and we're going to talk about making open source libraries extensible through like a plugin architecture or middleware or something like that. So yeah, Tyler just wanted to ask a couple of questions about some of my thoughts on the subject. And so I'll just go ahead and let you take it away, Tyler.
Okay. So to give everybody kind of a reference, I'm an open source contributor by night, IT by day. I'm working on a project called Bootstrap Wysiwyg, and here pretty soon we're going to be adding a plugin system to it. And so I'll just kind of want to get some input on some of your thoughts of the architecture of plugin systems.
Cool. Well, let me just get a little bit of context. So it's Bootstrap Wysiwyg. The tiny open source Bootstrap Wysiwyg rich text editor, or do you have a link that you can give me just so I make sure I'm looking at the right one?
Yeah, it's the one by Steve Athon.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah, I got it. And it's on version 1.0 right now?
No.
Okay.
1.05.
Oh, okay. There's a badge on the README that says it's version 1.0.
Yeah, until you go to 1.1, the badge don't change.
I see. Oh, I see. So you have to go to the tag. So like what I'm looking at in the GitHub repo is not the latest.
It is. What it is like I said, the tag, the release tag down there. All we've submitted, so all our releases so far are patch releases. They're not minor releases.
I see. Okay.
So
okay.
Up that yet?
That makes sense. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So is this like obviously I guess it's an in the browser Wysiwyg editor. Can I see a demo of this?
Yeah, 1 second. I'll get you the link.
So for anybody who's watching or curious, it's actually here. I'll just share my screen real quick.
I sent you a link to the demo.
So this is the GitHub repo, github.com/steveathon/bootstrap Wysiwyg. And then you just sent me a link. Okay, it's steveathon.github.io/bootstrap/Wysiwyg.
Yeah.
Okay, let me turn off my screen sharing here. Okay, so we've got so the main Wysiwyg like piece of this is the rich text editor. Like that's the feature.
Right. We don't ship the toolbar or anything like that. The whole project is made to where you create your toolbar and you just use a set of data attributes that we tell you to use, and you put in one piece of code, JavaScript into your project, and you're good to go.
Okay, cool. So you want to add plugins to this. What are some of the kind of plugins that you're hoping to add?
Well, kind of pretty much all the stuff that we think that people will want to do. We can do pretty much with just some events, like when the editor's initialized, when maybe hook into an event where someone pays something to the editor, when the editor is focused on, or the blur event when it's closed, just various events like that. And we think we can get by on that, or not just get by, but we think that will be what our users want. And so that's pretty much what we're looking for.
Okay. So yeah, I'll just talk about some of the extensible libraries that I'm familiar with, and maybe like some of the way that they accomplish this extensibility on in those contexts, and maybe it can kind of inform what we talk about for here. So One of the most extensible like middleware heavy libraries that I'm familiar with in my short time in the industry is Express. Have you used Express before?
I am about to. I've just gotten into a user group and they're using Express, so I'm having to learn it right now.
Okay, cool. And have you used Redux before, or have you heard of it? Okay.
I don't think I haven't heard of it either.
Okay, yeah, Redux is a fantastic state management open source library, really popular in the React community, especially.
Okay.
But yeah, so Redux and Express have a really similar concept called middleware, and basically the idea is you have like this system in place where when there are API calls into the Express library or the React library, it has this list of other functions that it calls as part of that API call, and then it makes calls to those, and then it continues on its merry way to do its own stuff. And so the really basic way to accomplish this is just to say, hey, we have this this hook into anytime somebody hits this URL in an Express context. So anytime somebody hits a URL with a GET request, then I want you to call this this function, and then I'll let you know when I'm done by calling a callback, or I'm not asynchronous, so just whenever I'm done, then continue on your merry way. And so it's almost like a subscribe type functionality where you subscribe to anytime this event fires or anytime this like somebody calls into this API. I want you to also run my code, and I can modify some stuff. I wonder, like, will I be daring enough to do this? Maybe I can live code a really quick demonstration of what I'm talking about. That might be a little bit easier to understand. So let me just
just so I'm clear, it's basically they provide a public method, and their public method calls all the various private methods needed in order to get the job done.
Yeah, but like the yeah, so like it's not really necessarily or necessary to call private methods in many of these contexts. It's like I just, in the context of your Wysiwyg editor, plugins mostly just need to know when blur events happen, right?
Right.
And anything that would be like private to your library would still be private in the context of a plugin. If a plugin needs to access those things, then you should make them public APIs. So the plugin system shouldn't be some sort of privileged system at all. It should just be using regular APIs, and then people can utilize those public APIs just through these types of plugins.
Okay.
So let me just try this. This might just fall over, but I'm just going to go to JSBin really quick, and we'll try to write kind of a plugin type architecture or like concept here. So if we have this, let's say that we have a logger abstraction on top of console log. So we'll say our logger, and it has a log. And here I'm going to pull in Babel here because I don't know how to write not ES6 anymore. So it'll have a log function that console.log arguments. I'll just basically pass that on in an info as well. And so on. And then I can call logger and say clear. Okay, so then if I say logger, hello world, and logger is not a function because it's not, log. There we go. Logger log, hello world. So I have this abstraction. It's nice, and maybe I'm going to use this for analytics or some other thing. So if I wanted to add a sort of plugin structure or architecture to this logger object, then basically what let's think about some of the different things that I'd want to accomplish with like middleware or plugins or add-ins in a logger type concept. So I have these two APIs that I expose on this logger, and I would think that the only really plugin places that I'd want to hook into is anytime somebody calls log, and maybe I'd have like a before the console log happens and an after the console log happens. So I want to be able to run some code before here and after here. And then I want to be able to maybe do different things to the arguments that are being passed to the console log. So like instead of hello world, I want this to say, like maybe I'll say I want to have it prefix with my logger and then whatever the output is. So hello world, right? So let's just add that feature.
Okay.
Does that make sense so far, what we're trying to accomplish here? Yes. Sweet. Okay, so the way that we're going to do this is right here, I'm going to be calling into, well, I'm going to need to have some mechanism to keep track of all of the plugins that I need to invoke. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to, yeah, we'll take this out. And I'm going to make a function here just to keep my closure all nice. And I'll return this. And so now I'm getting the same behavior as before. Here I'm going to actually log done.
Now you got the module pattern, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So yeah, now we can see here, and we'll just say at time. Now you can see when I'm actually running stuff. Okay, so here we're going to have our plugins. And for the purposes of this, like you could really accomplish this in any, like a whole bunch of different ways. The way that I am going to do this is I'll have this plugins object that has a log and an info. So something that's the exact same structure as my API. So I'll have a log. But because I want to be able to hook into both before this console log happens and after the console log happens, I'm going to make this log an object that has a pre, and that'll be an array, and a post, and that'll be an array. And then I'll have an info, that'll be a pre and a post. And then I'll need to expose this plugins API. Now, normally, if I were like going to put a lot of thought into this, I probably wouldn't just expose this plugins object to be manipulated however I want. I'd probably expose a function and to actually, you know what, that's what I'll do. So we'll say add plugin, and this will be, I don't know, we'll take a method and a hook, I guess we'll call it. I don't really matter. And then we'll say plugins on method, on hook, and then the plugin, and push plugin. And then you'll probably want to have a remove plugin. I'll probably just be this same thing. I think you kind of get the idea. So I'm not going to implement remove plugin. But like, do you want me to implement remove plugin, or do you kind of get the idea what's going on?
You don't have to, but I'm looking at plugin at the moment. So what's with the plugins method hook? I'm trying to figure that out here.
Yeah. So maybe if I call into this API, it might make a little bit more sense. So let's say I'm going to add this plugin, and I'll go ahead and add the plugin, and then you can ask more questions. Hopefully this will make a little bit more sense. So now this logger module has an add plugin function on it that I can call. So we'll say logger.add plugin. And the method that I want to add the plugin to is the log method. So I want to add this, I want to hook into the log method. I want to hook into the before the log method happens. Now, I'm not, by the way, I'm not saying that this is a really great plugin API. I'm just, you could probably design something that's a little bit less kind of magical. You might be able to have something that's more like add plugin pre-log or something like that. But yeah, you can be creative and get feedback from your users there. So then we'll have this function that we can call when we want, and I'll just have it alert there. Okay, so then as part of our actual internal code, when we're actually calling these different functions, we can simply say plugins.log.pre for each plugin, and say plugin, and we'll just call it. And we'll do the same for here, except it will be post. And then we do the same for info, but we can do that here in a second. But does that make sense what's going on here? Are you familiar with ES6? Maybe I shouldn't be using so much ES6.
Your ES6 is fine. I don't use it, but I've checked it out enough. I can kind of get an idea. It's still just that method hook. Because you're calling.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So here I'll just do console.log adding plugin method hook. If we run this, we're going to get that hey there. So when that add plugin is called, it's being called with log. And so it's taking the plugins object and pulling the log property off of that.
Okay.
And then the hook is pre. And so it's going to take the pre property off of the log object. And then it's going to push onto this pre array. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So that's all the add plugin is doing. And so it's just a method to add properties onto our arrays that we have here. And these are the hooks that can be called before or after we do our own work inside of our logger plugin or our logger library. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so now as part of our log function, we call all of our pre-plugins and just invoke those. And when I ran that, you see that I get the hey there dialog as part of this this plugin. That's a log pre-plug, or yeah, a log pre-plugin. So you're just basically exposing hooks into the things that you're doing inside of your library. And so like in the context of Express, it's like I want to be able to add CORS headers to all of the requests being made at this URL or anything below it. And so I'm hooking into what's happening when this URL is hit. In the context of Redux, I want to have like run analytics anytime this action is dispatched or any actions are dispatched. In the context of Angular Formally, which is the library that I wrote and added kind of a plugin architecture to it. I want to be able to manipulate these field configurations before they go into Angular Formally. Yeah, that, or I want to manipulate the templates. So like any time that the library is doing something that's of interest to anyone, you can expose a way to hook into that behavior through the use of some plugin architecture like this. Now, we're still not all the way there with this mylogger, like adding that mylogger thing. You know, it's still adding hello world, and we'd have to add a little bit more to our plugin architecture to accomplish that. But before I get into that, just wanted to ask if you had any, like if this is all clear and making sense to you so far.
Yes.
Okay. Sweet. So do you, yeah, well, I'll go ahead and add in how we would actually add some functionality rather than just, hey, letting you know that this is being called. So the type of API that we're looking for is we want to accept the args, or whatever is being called in log. In this case, it's any number of arguments, and so we'll just accept that as args. And actually, we'll spread that across, or we'll accept those as REST parameters. And then inside of here, we're going to say return. Let's see. Probably should just return an array as well. So we'll say my logger, colon, and then args. So if you're not familiar, are you familiar enough with ES6 to understand what's going on here?
Not with the ... args, but other than that, I think so.
So this part right here, or this in the function?
The just what the ... args is.
Oh, okay. So normally this, like in a function, you'd have like parameter A, parameter B, parameter C. But what happens if this can be called with any number of parameters, like console.log be called with A, B, C, D, so on and so forth, like as many parameters as you can imagine.
So method overloading.
Yeah. Yep. So the way that you could accomplish this is you could say array dot call, like crazy stuff on arguments to turn it into an array, and then you can get all of the arguments. Or you can simply use this ES6 syntax for rest parameters, and we'll call this args. And then that turns the arguments into an array just called args. So it's like a shortcut for a hack that we used to do a lot in JavaScript, and now we don't have to do anymore because we have rest parameters. So that's what it's doing right here. The ... right here is doing something different. But do you understand what's going on right here? Did that make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay. Great. So what's going on right here, and actually, you know what? I don't even need to do this because normally you'd only need the ... args if you had like A, B, and then you wanted the rest of them. Mm-hmm. Or if you wanted to turn arguments into an array. But in our case, we don't really care about either of those things. And so we can simply use arguments. So what this ... right here is doing is it's saying, like, let's go back in like an alternative way to do this. We'd say return my logger, and then we'd say like arguments at 0, and then arguments at 1, arguments at 2, so on and so forth, right? But like we could never do that effectively, and so we could do some magic to actually this isn't even magic. We just do concat arguments. That's just an array method to concatenate these two things together. But with ES6, we get built-in syntax for that. And so actually, if we go to the Babel REPL, this will probably be instructive for us. The way that it actually like compiles that is to concat the array version of arguments. And so if instead of arguments this was boo, then this would turn boo into a consumable array, which is like doing all kinds of crazy magic stuff. But basically it's just concatenating one array to another. Does that make sense with what's going on there?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Great. So ES6 is
shortcuts a lot of the pain in the rear stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So here now we're instead of calling for each and then just invoking the plugin, we actually need to do something about like what's being returned from these plugins. And so we're going to because we're using arrow functions here, we can actually do this. You can just pass arguments here. Because in an arrow function context, arguments is actually referring to the parent context, not the arguments of this function. So yeah, without ES6 arrow function, then arguments would actually be the plugin and then the index and then the full array, because this is for each callback. But luckily, because we're using arrow functions, it's basically the same as var args equals arguments and args. Does that make sense what's going on?
Yes.
Okay, sweet. So ES6 arrow functions are awesome. So then we'll go to, instead of for each, we'll say map, or actually reduce. Are you familiar at all with reduce?
Some.
Okay. So basically it's like you've got, let's see, you have A equals 1, 2, 3. And if you wanted to sum those up together, then you could use the reduce function to say, okay, I want you to run this function on each one of these items, 1, 2, and then 3. And whatever I return from the first iteration, I want you to pass that as an argument to the second iteration. Then whatever is returned from the second iteration, I want you to pass that as an argument to the third iteration. And so in the first iteration, and we can initialize it to 0. And so in the first iteration, we're going to say, okay, take whatever was given to me before, which is defaulting to 0, and add this current item to it. And so we'll say, okay, add 1 to 0, and we'll return that. And so now we're returning 1. And so that means in the second iteration, we're passing in 1, and now we say, okay, now add this item, which is 2, and return that. So that will be 3. And then in the last iteration, we'll say, okay, you returned 3 to me, so now I'm going to add another 3 to that. I'm going to add this item, which is 3, and return that, and that will be 6. And that reduces this A array down to 6.
Okay.
Does that hopefully sort of make sense without actually showing you any code?
Yep, sure did.
Okay, great. So I feel like I'm probably spending too much time teaching you stuff that we didn't plan on talking about. So I'm sorry if we're...
It's been a while since I've used some of these methods.
Yeah. Reduce has kind of turned into my hammer that will solve all problems recently for me. So so we're going to actually say const args is equal to, we'll take the reduction of all of our plugins, and whatever the plugin returns will be passed on to the next one. And so we're going to start out with arguments, and we'll call this, this is sometimes called the accumulator. So that's the thing that I returned from you last time. So like in that var a equals 1, 2, 3. And like the second iteration, that value would be 1. So that would be the accumulator. And then in this instance, it would be the accumulation of the previous iterations. So that would be 3. And so our accumulator in this scenario is the one that's like whatever was returned from the last time we ran these plugins. And so in this case, we're going to pass the accumulator to our plugin. And we'll, because this is an arrow function, it's the implicit return. And we'll return whatever's returned from the plugin with that accumulator. And I think, yeah, and we'll add a spread operator on that. So this is this function is called with all of those arguments like that. Then we get the args there, and we'll pass those args there. So now if we run that, we are going to get on, it's JSBin isn't great at this, but if you see in the actual console, we're going to get my logger hello world.
Okay.
So like I said, I think that was a lot of stuff that probably wasn't really relevant to our conversation about plugins, and maybe it was more confusing than helpful, but is this at all helpful in the context of what you're actually trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I think so. Okay.
Cool. I'll share this with you so you can take a look at it later. And yeah, hopefully that gives you kind of an idea of how I think about plugins, is kind of anywhere that anyone's interested in jumping in to make alterations to how the library is being called, or how the, or like just hooking in to say, hey, this thing happened, and so I'm gonna, I can do that, I can log an event, or I can do analytics or something. Anytime there's some sort of call into your API, that's a good, kind of a good place to add a hook or a plugin hook like this.
Okay.
So hopefully that's helpful. Did you have any other questions?
Yeah, a couple. So
okay.
You mentioned getting with users on the API. Do you normally do that, or you just kind of plan it all out and figure out yourself and come up with what you think is best?
Well, it kind of depends. Like if I have existing users of my library, I definitely want to make sure that I know what they want. If I'm just kind of building it on my own, then it's really good to get feedback from other people. And so I'll make a pull request on my own library, and then and like have examples and documentation in there. and then I'll get feedback from other developers in the community and say, hey, I know you don't really use this library, but like, what's your opinion on this kind of an API? If you were to use this library, would this be a good API? So yeah, that would be a good approach. Probably people that you are kind of target market for what you're looking for. So even if they don't use your library, if they're the type of developers who might be interested one day, like if you're, yeah, I don't know, people who are using Bootstrap in your case.
Yeah, so we're kind of in between stage. We have some users, but they're not really they don't really talk in the issues at all.
Mm-hmm.
So we're kind of in an in-between stage where we have users, but we don't hear from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a really good idea then, like this is part of building a good community. And I actually have a talk that I recently gave that I will send to you. Trying to find it.
Which talk was it? I watched one here a while back of you.
Okay, so I gave a talk at FluentConf called The First Pull Request, and I talked a little bit about managing an open source project.
I don't know if that's the one I watched or not.
Okay. Well, if you just go to talks.kentcdodds.com,
okay.
Then, wait, the chat isn't linking that. But anyway, you can see all of the talks that I have in here. But I actually recently live streamed a practice talk of the one that I'm talking about. It's the managing an open source project, giving that at Space City in a month. Processing archive, what on earth? So apparently it's not available, right? Oh wait, no, that's something else. Here we go. Yeah, so it's like an hour long. There we go. So I'll get you that link as well. You can search for it. Just search for managing an open source project, Utah.js. You should probably be able to find it from there. Yeah, in there I talk about building a community and give a bunch of tips. I have slides as well, actually. If we go to slides, manage OSS, off here as well. That will give you a bunch of tips and different things like that as well. So anyway, I kind of got on that whole thing about the talk, but basically what I would say for you is to like kind of build a community around the project so that you have a venue where you can actually ask people for feedback. And so a really good place for that is using chat like Gitter or Slack or Discord or something like that, to have a place like a venue where users of your library can go to and get and like submit feedback and ask questions and different things like that. Because otherwise, like your only communication with users is in the issues, and that's normally when they're having problems. And so you want to be able to reach out to the users, and a good way to do that is through Gitter.
Okay. And I have one other question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So in your example, you use the module pattern.
Mm-hmm.
In our code, I mean, we're using jQuery right now, but my plan is to pull jQuery out and just have a pure JavaScript. What is using the module pattern a good idea whenever doing adding extensibility?
It's not necessarily for extensibility. The only reason I did it in the JS bin is limitations with JS bin. I wanted to like make that plugins thing private to like inside of that.
Well, I've seen a lot of projects when they go to make extensibility, or they either start with the module pattern or they add it later on at some point.
Yeah, so lots of open source projects these days are using Babel to transpile their code, and so they can use ES6 and ES6 modules, and then they bundle it together with something like Webpack. And so let me see if oh yeah. So I've got actually an Egghead.io series. I'll give you a link to. there's a specific lesson. It's the last lesson where I demonstrate how to bundle the library into like a single browser-ready file that people just can load. And it comes packaged with what's called the UMD pattern, which is Universal Module Definition. And what this means is all of your code is accessible via a single script that people can require or put on this as a script tag or whatever, but they can consume it using AMD, which is like a kind of a older module pattern, or CommonJS, the node module pattern, or as a global, which is traditional browser modules. Doesn't support ES6 modules, but nobody does yet. So yeah, so anyway, that's the kind of the pattern that I've seen and used myself. And that way, like, you can build out your library in like a bunch of different smaller files that are easier to unit test and that kind of thing. Yeah. And then you can package it up and deliver it to people.
Yeah, I've been writing unit tests this project here recently, and it's, let's see, I mean, it's a large file. I mean, what is it like? Let's see. I mean, I'm having to unit test a 333 line file, so.
Yeah, that's not easy.
No, it's not.
Yeah. So definitely, I would recommend. Like, I'm looking at it right now, and I can definitely see a couple of places that could really easily be taken and put into their own file, make it easier to unit test that. And then, yeah, you could kind of bring it all together in a single file. So you can check out that series or that course on Egghead I have. It's totally free, and hopefully you learn something.
You talk about, do you already have the code and you break it up, or do you start fresh? And
generally, like now, whenever I start, I kind of know how I'm going to structure things. But like it'd be pretty easy to break it up from what you have now. Okay. Just like take utility functions and different things like that you have and break those up. So.
Okay. Well, that's pretty much all I had.
Cool. Hopefully this was helpful. Good luck on your library and your plugins, adding extensibility to the library. It's cool.
Yeah, I might hit you up whenever I need some feedback.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Tyler.
No problem. See ya.